One of the Apostle Paul's letters to the Ephesians, he writes this verse. We're just going to look at one verse for 2 minutes today before the children come. He writes this. He says, "Although I am less than the least of all God's people, this grace was given me to preach to the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ." I wonder how many Christmases it takes until you really know the story of Christmas. I wonder if there's anyone here for whom this is your first Christmas. This is all going to be new for you. Let me see your hands out there. First Christmas. Okay, not too many of us. How about 5 Christmases? You've been through 5 Christmases. 10. All right, 10. 20. 30 Christmases. 60 Christmases. All right. 90 Christmases. There we go. We have one of our folk at second service that is 90 Christmases there. You know, you wonder how many Christmases it takes till you really know the story. If someone were to come to you and say, "Tell me the story of Christmas." You've been through 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of them. And you say, "Oh, I know that story. It's about Jesus, the baby in the manger, and Joseph, and Mary, angels. There's some shepherds and wise men, and sheep and cattle that are lowing." I don't know what a lowing cattle looks like, but you know, they're there too. And we figure that after so many years, we've got it figured out. You know, we say, "Oh, I know what that story's about. I don't need to take much time with it." But this verse that the Apostle Paul writes in the book of Ephesians, where he talks about the unsearchable riches of Christ, says this to us today, that you have not even begun to figure it out. You may have been to 40 or 50 Christmases, but you really have not yet plumbed the depth of all that is here. You know, there's another place in the Bible where the Apostle Paul talks about knowing things. And he says this in 1 Corinthians 8:2. He says, "If anyone thinks he knows anything, he still doesn't know it as he ought to." And in another translation called God's Word translation, it says this: "Those who think they know something still have a lot to learn." Paul says, if you think you know Christmas, you still don't understand that you're never going to fully plumb the depths of all that there is in Christmas. There's always more for you to learn. Paul uses this wonderful word in Ephesians when he talks about the unsearchable riches of Christ, about what Jesus has done, about what God has done. He uses this word that means it's impossible to understand. The word unsearchable there, it talks about that you can spend your life and you will never get to the bottom of it. It's inexhaustible. It is untraceable. You can search and search, and you're never going to exactly nail down all the things there are. It is fathomless. Now, I don't know how many of you understand fathom, but being near the bay and being near the ocean, that's a way they used to measure depth. Right? And so the sailors would put a weight on a rope, and they would drop that rope over the side of the boat, and they would let it go down. And it would have marks on it, fathom marks. So fathom was as far as you could stretch a rope this way. So it made sense. They'd pull up the rope, and they'd stretch it 1, 2, 3, 4 fathoms as they pulled it up. And that's the way they measured depth. The Apostle Paul says the riches that are found in Jesus Christ are fathomless. You're going to drop that rope over the side, and it's going to go down and down and down and down, and it's just never going to stop. There is no end to all you could learn and know and understand about Christ. It is never going to hit bottom. And we've done that a little bit over these weeks. We've explored the riches of Christ. And with Mary's song, as we looked at Mary on that first Sunday of Advent, we talked about the way she could see into the riches of Christ, that he was going to elevate humble people like her. that he was going to turn society's value system upside down, and those people who ended up at the bottom were going to be restored to a place of honor. Then we looked at the shepherds, and we looked at what God was doing with them and bringing them into the picture, lifting them up, welcoming people who others had ignored. We can look at Christ as God with us. The fact that here is the eternal Son of God, and as we did imagine, how did he get in there? How did he come into this small form? And that he serves as the representative of the human race to bring us back to peace with God. His courage as he goes to the cross in his last week. His resurrection. All that it means for Christ to be here. You know, even the animals have a part in the work of Christ. The Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 8 that all creation groans, waiting for the fulfillment of what Christ has done. So animals groan, trees groan, everything is waiting to be delivered one day. Wise men, scholars from Iran and Iraq who come to honor Jesus. You can go on, and you can never get to the end of all of the depth, the miracles, the incredible grace that there is in Jesus Christ. But you have to explore to do that. You have to work at it. You know, sometimes we take a look and we think we know what's going on. We say, well, I got that figured out. Now I'll go on and go further. But we have to look more deeply. And we have an opportunity to do that this season today, to look more deeply. Let me close my thoughts here this morning with a little story. It's one of my favorite stories about a scientist by the name of Louis Agassiz. Now, this is before the tennis player Agassiz, mind you. Okay, so this is some years ago. There was a naturalist scientist by the name of Louis Agassiz. He was a very famous fellow, and he would go around and make speeches, and they were public speeches. He wanted anyone in the community to come. And so there's a story told that there was a woman who worked in the kitchen. She was not a highly educated woman. She knew how to read. And so she read, but she was a scullery maid. And she went up to him at the end of a lecture and said, "My goodness, Dr. Agassiz, you have such wonderful opportunities for study, and I just so wish I could be part of the world that you're in, but I just sit on a stool and I peel potatoes all day." And so he said, "Have you never received an opportunity?" And she said, "Well, no, I don't think so." And he looked at her and he says, "Where is it that you put your feet when you work?" She said, "Well, I put my feet on the floor." And he asked, "Well, what is the floor made of?" She said, "Well, it's made of bricks." So he said, "I want you to go and write me a letter about bricks." And so she took up the challenge. She went and she learned everything that she could about bricks. She studied it. She was writing a letter to the great Dr. Agassiz, so she wanted this to be a great letter. She wrote this letter. Dr. Agassiz received a 36-page letter about brick. The story goes that he took that letter, he worked it up a little bit, and he submitted it to a journal, and it was published. And she received a check from Dr. Agassiz for the article that she had written about bricks. And in that letter, he wrote a note of explanation, and then he asked her the question, "And what is under the bricks?" And so she went back to her kitchen, she pulled up one of the bricks, and there were ants. And so she began to study. She began to write and learn about ants, and the story has it that she eventually published a book and became a person who lectured in many places about ants. Now, she thought she had no opportunity. There she was, sitting on a bench, peeling potatoes, but there were bricks under her, there were ants under her, there were things to be studied, things to be learned, and you can explore as well. If you think you know everything about Christmas yet, you don't know it yet. Maybe you might want to think about something here and write a letter. I don't know if it would be 36 pages long. But you can explore this, and I will tell you this on good authority. But there is enough here for a lifetime of study and exploration and praise of God, and you'll never get to the bottom of it. So let's let the children help us explore it a bit more today.